The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor of my penthouse, and I didn't even flinch. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I watched my sister Emma and my ex-best friend Zoe being escorted out of the building by security. Their designer dresses, bought with money they'd stolen from me in my past life, now wrinkled and stained with the wine they'd thrown at each other moments before. "Ma'am, should we call the police?" my assistant asked, her tablet already pulled up to the security footage. I smiled, swirling the remaining champagne in my glass. "No need, Marcus already handled that. I want to savor this." 2 weeks. That's all it had taken for their unbreakable bond to detonate spectacularly. In my previous life, I'd spent 15 years as their emotional support system, their therapist, their punching bag, and their ATM. I'd mediated every fight, absorbed every cruel word, and funded their dreams while mine withered. This time, I'd simply stepped back and watched them destroy each other. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really began, the day I died. It was my 30th birthday, and I was lying on the bathroom floor of my cramped studio apartment, staring at the water-stained ceiling as my heart gave its final, stuttering beats. The bottle of sleeping pills I'd taken, the ones Emma had so helpfully suggested would take the edge off your anxiety, sat empty on the sink. Turns out, when you mix them with the special birthday wine Zoe had brought over, the edge you fall off is permanent. I'd figured it out too late, of course. Always too late. The realization had hit me when I'd overheard them on my phone, which I'd left recording accidentally. Emma's voice sharp with irritation. "God, when is she going to die already? The life insurance payout is taking forever." Zoe's laugh, the same laugh I'd loved since we were 7 years old. "At least once she's gone, we can finally be together without her moping around. And that trust fund from her grandmother finally transfers to you as next of kin. We'll be set for life, babe." Babe. They'd been sleeping together for 3 years, using my apartment for their trysts while I was at my second job. The second job I'd needed because Emma had maxed out my credit cards and Zoe had borrowed my savings for her failed business ventures. The darkness that came wasn't peaceful. It was cold and angry and filled with regret so sharp it felt like swallowing glass. Then I woke up. I was 18 again, sitting in my childhood bedroom, and my phone was ringing. The caller ID read Zoe, and the date on my screen made my breath catch. September 3rd, 2011. The morning of my high school graduation, the day that in my previous life, Emma had convinced me to give Zoe my college fund to start her revolutionary social media app that went nowhere. I'd been given a second chance, and this time I wasn't going to be anyone's victim. My door burst open. Without a knock? It never did in this house. Emma stood there, 17 and already beautiful in that calculated way she'd later perfect. Her honey blonde hair was curled just so, her makeup subtle but expensive. Behind her, I could see our mother hovering, her face pinched with its usual expression of vague disappointment directed at me. "Mom needs your graduation money for Emma's SAT prep tutor," my sister announced, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "The one she has isn't good enough, and you know how important this is. Your little community college can wait." In my past life, I'd handed it over. I'd had the acceptance letter to UCLA with a partial scholarship sitting in my desk drawer, but Emma had needed that SAT tutor, and then she'd needed a prom dress, and then a car, and then. I'd never made it to UCLA. I'd never made it anywhere. "No," I said simply, and the word felt like swallowing sunlight. Emma's perfectly shaped eyebrows shot up. "What?" I said no, that's my money. Grandma left it specifically for my education. My grandmother, my father's mother, had been the only person in my family who'd ever seen me as more than a resource to be depleted. She'd died Assad when I was 16, and her trust fund had been my only hope for escape. My mother pushed into the room, her Chanel perfume overwhelming in the small space. Margaret Chen had married my father for his money and spent 20 years slowly poisoning his relationship with me while elevating Emma, her daughter from her first marriage, to the status of a golden idol. My father, weak and conflict-averse, had let it happen. "Don't be selfish, Lily," my mother said, her voice dripping with practiced disappointment. "Emma has potential, real potential. You're smart enough to make it work anywhere. Community college will be fine for someone like you." Someone like you, code for someone we don't value. "Emma can use her own graduation money," I said, standing up. In my past life, I'd been timid, hunched, always trying to make myself smaller. Now I stood at my full height, and I was surprised to realize I had 2 inches on my mother. Or Dad can pay for it. I'm going to UCLA. The slap came fast, my mother's palm cracking across my face with practiced precision. She'd done this before, in both lives, always where the marks wouldn't show. But this time, I'd been expecting it. I'd turned my head at the last second, and instead of catching me full on the cheek, her hand glanced off my jawline. It still hurt, but it didn't rattle my teeth like it used to. "You ungrateful little bitch," my mother hissed. "After everything we've done for you." Everything they'd done. Like allowing me to exist in their house while treating me like an unpaid servant. Like taking the insurance money when my father died suddenly of a heart attack during my first year of community college. Money that should have been split between Emma and me, but somehow all ended up in my mother's account. Like introducing me to Zoe's mother at their country club, knowing that Zoe would latch onto me as her project friend, someone she could feel superior to while draining dry. "I'm leaving," I said, grabbing the backpack I'd already packed in this timeline. I'd learned from the best, from myself, from the life I'd already lived. I knew exactly what was coming, and I'd prepared. The trust fund from my grandmother was mine at 18, and I'd already been to the bank the week before the moment I'd realized I'd been reborn. I'd transferred every penny to a new account at a different bank, one my family didn't know about. I'd gotten a P.O. box for my mail. I'd lined up a job at a bookstore near UCLA that started in 2 weeks. I'd already secured campus housing. In my past life, I'd let them talk me into staying just one more year to help Emma adjust to college. That 1 year had become 12, and by then I'd been so broken down that escape felt impossible. "You walk out that door and you're not our daughter anymore," my mother said, playing her trump card. In my past life, this threat had frozen me in place. The terror of being alone, of being unloved, had been greater than the pain of staying. But I'd already been alone. I'd died alone, murdered by the 2 people I'd loved most, and I'd learned that being surrounded by people who hated you was infinitely worse than being by yourself. "Good," I said and walked out. Emma's shriek of rage followed me down the stairs. My father was in his study, door closed, pretending he couldn't hear the commotion. Typical. I didn't even bother saying goodbye to him. In 6 months, he'd be dead of that heart attack, and this time, I wasn't going to be around to watch my mother and Emma drain his accounts before his body was cold. My phone buzzed. Zoe. In my past life, I'd called her crying from a park bench 3 hours after this fight, and she'd come to pick me up, taken me to her house, and started the process of making herself indispensable to me. It was a pattern she'd perfected. Find me at my lowest, offer help, then slowly twist that help into debt and obligation. I declined the call and blocked her number. The first week of my new life was disorienting in its simplicity. I moved into my UCLA dorm room, a cramped double with a roommate named Sarah who was passionate about marine biology and made excellent chocolate chip cookies. I started my job at the bookstore, shelving novels and helping customers find obscure philosophy texts. I went to orientation events and smiled at strangers and felt the strange, unfamiliar sensation of peace. Emma called 47 times in those first 7 days. My mother called 32. My father called once, a brief voicemail asking me to be reasonable and think of the family. I didn't answer any of them. Zoe, blocked and unable to reach me directly, showed up at my dorm on day 8. She looked the same as I remembered from 18. Long dark hair, sharp green eyes, clothes just expensive enough to signal her family's wealth, but not so expensive as to seem like she was trying. Zoe's whole existence was a carefully calculated performance of effortless superiority. "Lily, oh my God, I've been so worried." She pushed past my roommate into our room, arms outstretched for a hug I didn't return. "Your mom told me you guys had a fight, but I didn't know you'd left. Why didn't you call me?" "Because you're a parasite," I thought. "Because you and my sister murdered me and stole everything I had." "I needed a clean break," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I'm starting fresh." Zoe's face crumpled into an expression of hurt that I would have fallen for completely in my past life. "A clean break? Lily, I'm your best friend. We've been best friends since we were kids. What about me requires breaking from?" This was her signature move, turning any boundary I tried to set into an attack on her, making me comfort her for my own needs. I'd fallen for it hundreds of times before. I need space to figure out who I am without my family, I said carefully. In my past life, I'd never learned that no could be a complete sentence. I was still learning it now, but I was better armed with knowledge. I knew how this story ended if I let her back in. Without your family or without me? Zoe's eyes hardened, just for a second, and I saw the real her underneath the performance. The one who'd laughed about my death with my sister. Both, I said. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her recalculating. In my past life, this was when she would have cried and I would have crumbled. Instead, I stood firm, and after what felt like an eternity, she smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Fine, she said, but you're making a mistake, Lily. You're going to realize how much you need me, and by then, it might be too late. It was a threat wrapped in concern, and I recognized it for what it was because I'd lived through the execution. In my past life, Zoe had isolated me from every other friendship I'd tried to form, had positioned herself as the only person who really understood me, had made herself the gatekeeper to my own social life. Without her, I'd been too broken to trust anyone else. But I wasn't that Lily anymore. I'll take my chances, I said. She left, and I didn't watch her go. I had a chemistry lab to get to and a future to build, and absolutely no interest in the elaborate trap she and Emma would inevitably try to spring on me. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that I didn't need to destroy them. I just needed to remove myself from the equation and let nature take its course. The text started on day 12. Emma. Zoe is being such a bitch. She keeps asking about you and why you left and implying it's my fault. Can you please just call her and fix this? It was so perfectly Emma that I almost laughed. In my past life, I'd been the buffer between them from the moment I'd introduced them during my freshman year at community college. Emma had been visiting me, complaining about her basic roommate, and Zoe had been there, and I'd thought, foolishly, that my sister and my best friend getting along would make my life easier. Instead, it had made me the emotional dumping ground for two narcissists who hated each other but were too attracted to each other to stay apart. For 13 years, I'd played mediator, therapist, referee, and scapegoat. Every fight they'd had ended with one or both of them calling me to complain about the other, and if I didn't validate them sufficiently, I became the new target of their rage. I deleted the text without responding. 3 hours later, seriously, Lily, this is such a bad time. Mom's been crying because you left, and now I have to deal with her and Zoe being psycho. You're so selfish. Then, an hour after that, fine, be that way, but when Zoe and I become best friends without you, don't come crying back. That last text was almost prophetic in its irony. I took a screenshot of it for my records, a habit I'd developed in this new life, documenting everything, and went back to studying. By day 14, the texts from Emma had become frantic. Zoe keeps texting me about you. It's getting weird. She wants to meet for coffee to talk about how to help you. Should I go? Okay, I went. Lily, I think Zoe is obsessed with you. She talked about you for 2 hours. Never mind. She's actually really insightful. She gets what you're going through better than I do. We're getting drinks tomorrow. She's actually really cool when you're not around. I watched the train wreck begin with the detached interest of someone who'd already survived the crash. In my past life, Zoe and Emma had bonded over their shared access to my resources. I was the one with the stable job, the good credit, the trust fund they'd eventually help themselves to. I was useful, and that usefulness had kept their worst impulses focused on exploiting me rather than each other. Without me there as a common resource and a common target, they only had each other. My phone rang. Sarah looked over from her desk where she was studying for a calculus exam. You going to get that? I glanced at the screen. Emma. Again. No, I said. It's not important. But I listened to the voicemail later when Sarah had gone to bed and I was lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling of my new life. Lily, you need to call me back right now. Emma's voice was shrill and I could hear tears in it. Real ones, not the practiced ones she used on our parents. Zoe is insane. She came to mom's house today and told her that you asked her to check on me because you were worried about my mental health. She told mom I was showing signs of instability and that you thought I might need therapy. Mom believed her. Now mom thinks I'm having a breakdown and wants to send me to some retreat in Arizona, and this is all your fault for leaving and making everyone worried, and the voicemail cut off, having reached its time limit. I smiled in the dark. I hadn't asked Zoe to do anything, of course, but Zoe had a pattern. She identified the most vulnerable person in any situation and attached herself to them like a lamprey. With me gone, Emma, spoiled, insecure, desperate for validation, was the obvious target. And Emma had a pattern too. She lashed out at anyone who tried to control her, but she craved control over others. She and Zoe were both apex predators fighting over an empty territory now that I'd removed myself from the ecosystem. This was going to be spectacular. On day 16, Zoe called me from a number I didn't have blocked. I made the mistake of answering. Lily, thank God, I've been trying to reach you through Emma, but she's being so difficult. Zoe's voice was tight, strained in a way I'd never heard before. I need to talk to you about something important. I'm in class, I lied. I was actually at the bookstore, reorganizing the poetry section while my manager flirted with the cute barista from the coffee shop next door. It's about Emma. I'm really worried about her mental health. She's been saying some concerning things, and I think as her sister, you should— No, I said simply. There was a pause. No? No, I'm not getting involved. Emma is an adult. If you're concerned about her, talk to her directly or encourage her to see a professional, but I'm not mediating between you two, and I'm not responsible for her mental health. You're her sister. And you're supposedly her friend. Figure it out. I hung up and blocked the number. My hands were shaking. In my past life, standing up to Zoe had been unthinkable. She'd had a way of making me feel like I was crazy, like my boundaries were actually attacks, like my needs were unreasonable demands. Therapists called it gaslighting, but I'd called it normal until the day I'd died and gotten a second chance to recognize it for what it was. That evening, Emma sent me a wall of text messages that I only read because they were too long to ignore without my phone buzzing constantly. Zoe is a snake. She told Mom that I was using drugs. I'm not using drugs. Mom hired someone to search my room and they found a bag of weed that wasn't even mine. It was probably Zoe's. She planted it. She's trying to turn Mom against me so she can be the perfect daughter you never were. This is your fault for introducing us. Fix this. Then, I told Mom the truth about Zoe, about how she's manipulative and obsessed with our family. Mom doesn't believe me. She thinks I'm having a jealous breakdown because Zoe is accomplished and I'm struggling. This is all your fault. Then Zoe just called me crying, saying I accused her of horrible things and she doesn't know what she did wrong. She sounded so genuine. Maybe I was wrong, but also she definitely planted those drugs. I don't know what's real anymore. Call me. I didn't call her. Instead, I went to a study group for my American literature class where I met a guy named Marcus who was funny and kind and asked me about my opinions on Fitzgerald without once making me feel stupid for having them. We got coffee afterward, and he told me about his job at his family's commercial real estate firm and his dreams of starting a development company that focused on sustainable, affordable housing. That sounds amazing, I said, and meant it. It's probably naive, he said, smiling self-deprecatingly. My dad thinks I should focus on maximizing profits like a normal person. Naive isn't the same as impossible, I told him. Sometimes the naive thing is the thing that changes everything. He looked at me like I'd said something profound instead of just earnest, and I felt something in my chest that I hadn't felt in either of my lives, hope that wasn't attached to someone else's validation. We exchanged numbers, and when I got back to my dorm, I had 17 new messages from Emma and 6 from unknown numbers that I assumed were Zoe trying different phones. I deleted all of them without reading and went to bed. Day 21 was when everything truly imploded. I was in my modern poetry class when my phone started buzzing uncontrollably. Then Sarah's phone started buzzing. Then the girl next to me's phone lit up with a notification. During the break, I checked my phone and found that I'd been tagged in 47 social media posts in the last hour. The first one was from Emma's account. When your best friend tries to steal your sister and turn her against you. Some people are so two-faced, it's disgusting. At Zoe Martin at Lily Chen. Attached was a screenshot of text messages between Emma and Zoe. I zoomed in and read, Emma, I miss Lily. Do you think she's okay? Zoe, honestly, I think Lily left because she was tired of cleaning up your messes. She told me once that you were exhausting. Emma, what? Zoe, I probably shouldn't have said that, but you asked. Lily loves you, but she needed space from your drama. The next screenshot was from later in the conversation. Zoe, your mom told me about the college fund situation. Between you and me, I think Lily was right to leave. You can't expect her to fund your life forever. Emma, my mom told you? Why are you talking to my mom? Zoe, she called me because she's worried about you. Someone needs to be the stable one in this family since Lily left. The post devolved from there. Emma had screenshotted what looked like weeks of conversations between her and Zoe, each one showing Zoe subtly undermining Emma while positioning herself as the reasonable, mature one. In my past life, Zoe had said these same things about Emma to me and about me to Emma, always careful to keep us separated enough that we never compared notes. But without me there as the buffer, they'd only had each other to talk to. And Emma had finally seen what I'd been too blind to see for decades. Zoe was a snake. The second post was from Zoe's account. Sad when someone has a mental health crisis and lashes out at the people trying to help them. Praying for @Emma Chen and hoping she gets the support she needs. Lily Chen, please call your sister. The comments on both posts were vicious. People from our hometown, from Emma's high school, from Zoe's college, all weighing in with their opinions and their own stories of similar betrayals. It was a public bloodletting, and I was being dragged into it despite having spoken to neither of them in 3 weeks. Sarah looked over my shoulder and whistled. Jesus, are those your people? They were, I said, turning off my phone. Not anymore. But the universe wasn't done with the irony yet. That afternoon, I got a call from a number I did recognize. My father's office line. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Maybe curiosity about what excuse he'd have for calling now. Maybe hope that he'd actually chosen me for once. Lily. His voice was tired, older than I remembered. In my past life, he'd died when I was 19, and I'd been too caught up in my own misery to notice the signs that his health was failing. Your mother showed me the posts. Are you okay? Was I okay? I was better than okay. I was free. I'm fine, Dad. Emma is not well. The situation with her friend has escalated badly. Your mother is talking about sending her to a facility. That sounds like something you all need to figure out as a family, I said carefully. You're part of this family, Lily. Am I? The question hung in the air between us. Because Mom said I wasn't when I left. And you didn't stop her. There was a long silence, then, I've made mistakes. With you, with Emma, with how I've let your mother run things. I'm trying to fix that now. It's too late, I said. But I said it gently. In my past life, I'd been angry at him, bitter about his weakness. Now I just felt tired. I'm building my own life now. I hope you and Mom figure things out with Emma, I really do, but I can't be part of that anymore. Lily, I have to go to class, Dad. Take care of yourself. I hung up and turned off my phone completely. For the rest of the day, I existed in blissful silence, attending lectures and studying in the library and eating dinner with Sarah and her marine biology friends, who taught me the difference between a sea turtle and a tortoise and didn't ask me a single question about my family drama. When I finally turned my phone back on that night, I had over 200 notifications. The most relevant ones were these. From Emma, "This is all your fault. If you hadn't left, none of this would have happened. Zoe and I wouldn't have become friends, and she wouldn't have tried to replace you, and I wouldn't have trusted her, and mom wouldn't think I'm crazy. You did this to me. From my mother, Emma has been admitted to a psychiatric facility for evaluation after a violent altercation with her friend. The police were called to our home. This is your fault for abandoning your family when we needed you. I hope you're happy. From Zoe, from yet another new number. I know you're behind this somehow. You poisoned Emma against me. She attacked me, Lily. She pushed me and I fell and hit my head. I had to go to the emergency room. Your sister is dangerous and it's your fault for making her this way. And one from an unknown number that made me sit up in bed. Hi, Lily. This is Detective Chen from the LAPD. I'm not related to you, just an unfortunate coincidence in last names. I'm investigating an incident involving your sister, Emma Chen, and a Zoe Martin. There are conflicting accounts of what happened, and both parties have mentioned you as a potential witness. Please call me at your earliest convenience. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I started from the beginning and read through every single notification, piecing together the story. Emma and Zoe had been at my mother's house. They'd been arguing about the social media posts. The argument had escalated. Emma claimed Zoe had been trying to steal her inheritance, her family, her identity. Zoe claimed Emma was mentally unstable and violent. At some point, Emma had pushed Zoe, who'd fallen and hit her head on a marble coffee table. I knew exactly which table. I'd cleaned blood off it before in my past life, after Emma had thrown a tantrum and cut her hand on a broken vase. The police had been called. Zoe had gone to the hospital. Emma had been taken for a psychiatric evaluation. My mother was claiming emotional distress and blaming me for all of it. And the beautiful, terrible irony was that I hadn't done anything except remove myself from their equation. I called Detective Chen back the next morning from the campus security office where they let me use a private room after I explained the situation. Miss Chen, thank you for calling back, Detective Chen said. His voice was professional, neutral. I need to ask you some questions about your relationship with your sister and Miss Martin. I haven't spoken to either of them in 3 weeks, I said. I left home on September 3rd to attend UCLA, and I've had no contact with them since except for some text messages I didn't respond to. Can I ask why you cut contact? My family has a pattern of emotional and financial abuse, I said, and it felt powerful to say it out loud to someone official, someone who might actually listen. My sister and mother were particularly manipulative. I needed to get away to preserve my mental health. Zoe Martin was my former best friend, but I realized that relationship was also toxic, so I ended it. Did you introduce your sister and Miss Martin? I did years ago, but I haven't been involved in their relationship since I left. Both of them seem to think you're somehow orchestrating what happened between them. I laughed, and it came out harsh. I'm an 18-year-old college freshman detective. I'm not a puppet master. I just stopped being their emotional support system, and apparently they fell apart without it. There was a pause. That's actually consistent with what I'm seeing in the evidence. The text messages, the social media posts, the accounts from your mother, everyone is very focused on you not being there rather than on anything you actually did. Because I didn't do anything except leave. And you don't plan to return home or resume contact with these individuals? No, sir, I don't. That's probably wise, Detective Chen said, and I could hear the dry humor in his voice. For what it's worth, Miss Chen, I've seen a lot of family situations in my career. Sometimes the healthiest thing someone can do is walk away. It sounds like that's what you did. What's going to happen to my sister? I asked, surprising myself with the question. I didn't want Emma back in my life, but I also didn't want her destroyed. I just wanted her away. That depends on the evaluation and on whether Miss Martin decides to press charges. Your mother is advocating for treatment rather than prosecution. And given your sister's age and lack of prior incidents, that's likely what will happen. Miss Martin's injuries were minor, a concussion and some bruising. If your sister agrees to treatment and stays away from Miss Martin, this will probably be resolved without criminal charges. After I hung up, I sat in the security office for a long time, processing everything. In my past life, Emma and Zoe's toxic relationship had taken years to develop to the point where they'd conspired to murder me. They'd needed time to bond over their shared exploitation of me, time to plan, time to convince themselves they deserved my money and my life. Without me there as their victim and their glue, they'd speed run their way to violence in 3 weeks. The next 2 months were a blur of normalcy that felt like a miracle. I aced my midterms. I got promoted to shift supervisor at the bookstore. I went on 3 dates with Marcus, each one better than the last, until we decided to make it official, and he kissed me on the beach at sunset like we were in a movie. I joined a creative writing club and discovered I was good at poetry. I made friends with a girl in my dorm who was pre-law and wanted to specialize in family law because of her own toxic family history, and we bonded over our shared experiences of escape. My father called once a week, usually on Sunday mornings. The calls were brief and awkward, but he kept trying and I appreciated the effort, even if I couldn't quite forgive him yet. He told me Emma was in an inpatient treatment facility in Arizona, that she was doing better, that the doctors thought she had borderline personality disorder that had been exacerbated by my mother's manipulation and enabling. "Your mother and I are separating," he told me in November, the week before Thanksgiving. "The therapist helping Emma asked to meet with us, and some things came to light about how Margaret treated you. I'm ashamed I didn't see it sooner, Lily. I'm ashamed I didn't protect you." "Are you getting divorced?" I asked. "Yes, and I'm rewriting my will to ensure Emma gets help, not just money, and to ensure you get what you should have gotten all along, half of everything, and control of your inheritance at 21 instead of 30. In my past life, I'd never made it to 30, and Emma had gotten everything after I died at my mother's maneuvering. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. "Will you come home for Thanksgiving?" "No," I said gently, but maybe Christmas. "Just you and me. We can start small." He sounded relieved. "I'd like that." Zoe had disappeared from social media entirely. I heard through the grapevine, Sarah had a friend who knew someone from Zoe's college, that she dropped out and moved to New York to start fresh. The concussion had been worse than initially thought, apparently, and she'd had some memory issues and persistent headaches that made school difficult. Her parents were suing my mother for emotional distress and negligence, claiming that my mother had encouraged the toxic relationship between Emma and Zoe for her own entertainment. I felt bad about the concussion. I didn't feel bad about anything else. In December, I got a letter from Emma. It had been forwarded through my father, who'd asked permission before giving her my address. The letter was 5 pages long, handwritten on the facility's stationery, and I read it in the privacy of my dorm room while Sarah was out. It started with, "I don't expect you to forgive me." That was a good start. The rest of the letter was a detailed accounting of everything Emma remembered doing to me from childhood through the day I left. She wrote about stealing my things and blaming me for losing them, about convincing our mother I was difficult and ungrateful, about maxing out my credit cards and lying about paying them back, about introducing me to Zoe knowing that Zoe would latch onto me and drain me because she'd seen Zoe do it to other girls before. "I thought if you were busy managing Zoe, you wouldn't notice how much I was taking from you," she wrote. "I thought if you felt needed by someone, you wouldn't leave us. I thought I was being smart, but I was just being cruel." She wrote about the sleeping pills and the wine. "In therapy, I remembered something I'd blocked out. The night of your birthday, I didn't know Zoe was going to kill you. But after you died, when she told me what she'd done, I helped her cover it up. I told the police you'd been depressed. I took the life insurance money. I'm a murderer too, Lily. Or I would have been, if you hadn't somehow survived and left before we could hurt you." I read that paragraph 3 times, my hands shaking. In my past life, hadn't survived, but in this life, I'd walked away before they'd gotten the chance to try. The letter ended with, "I'm getting help, real help. I'm learning about boundaries and empathy and how to be a person instead of a parasite. I don't know if I'll ever be someone you want in your life, but I want you to know that I see what I did now. I see it, and I'm sorry, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be better. You were right to leave. You were right about everything. I hope you're happy now. You deserve to be happy. I'm so, so sorry." I folded the letter carefully and put it in my desk drawer. I didn't write back, not yet, maybe not ever. The apology was for her, part of her healing process. Whether I accepted it or not was for me to decide on my own timeline. That night, Marcus took me to dinner at a nice restaurant in Santa Monica, the kind of place I'd never been able to afford in my past life. He'd gotten an internship at a sustainable development firm for the summer, and he was excited about his future in a way that was infectious. "What about you?" he asked over dessert. "What's your dream? If you could do anything, be anything, what would it be?" In my past life, I'd never had an answer to that question. My dreams had been buried under everyone else's needs for so long that I'd forgotten how to have them. "I think I want to write," I said slowly. "Stories about people who save themselves, about people who walk away from bad situations and build something better." "That sounds perfect," Marcus said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "You're good at that, saving yourself, I mean. It's one of the things I admire about you." I squeezed his hand and felt tears prick my eyes. But they were good tears, grateful tears. I'd saved myself. I'd walked away from my family and from Zoe, and instead of falling apart, I'd thrived, and they'd imploded without me because the only thing holding their toxic system together had been my willingness to be their victim. On Christmas Eve, I went home to have dinner with my father at his new apartment, a modest two-bedroom place in Pasadena that was nothing like the mansion he'd shared with my mother. He'd lost weight and looked older, but there was something peaceful in his face that I'd never seen before. "Emma is coming home next week," he told me over the pot roast he'd made himself, badly but with effort. "To a supervised apartment, not to live with me. She's asked if she can see you, but I told her that's entirely up to you." "I'm not ready," I said. "That's okay, she understands." We ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then he asked, "Are you happy, Lily?" I thought about my dorm room and my friends and Marcus and my poetry workshop and the short story I was writing about a girl who got a second chance at life. I thought about the person I was becoming, the person I'd never gotten to be in my first life. "Yes," I said, "I really am." "Good," my father, Batese, said, and his eyes were wet. "That's all I ever should have wanted for you. I'm sorry it took me so long to figure that out." On New Year's Eve, I was at a party in Marcus's friend's apartment in Westwood. At midnight, Marcus kissed me while fireworks exploded over the city, and I felt the weight of my past life finally lift off my shoulders. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. It was from Zoe. "I know you're behind what happened with Emma. I don't know how you did it, but I know it was you. You turned her against me. You ruined everything. This isn't over." I stared at the text for a long moment. In my past life, a message like this would have sent me into a panic spiral. I would have spent hours analyzing it, worrying about it, trying to fix it. Now I just blocked the number and deleted the message. "Everything okay?" Marcus asked, his arm around my waist. "Everything's perfect," I said and kissed him again. Because the truth was, I hadn't ruined anything. I'd just stopped participating in my own destruction. Zoe and Emma had ruined themselves with their own greed and their own cruelty and their inability to exist without someone to leech off of. They'd imploded in 2 weeks without my mediation because their entire relationship had been built on their shared exploitation of me. Without me there to use, they'd only had each other, and they'd been too similar, too narcissistic, too cruel, too hungry for control to coexist peacefully. I'd given them nothing but my absence, and my absence had been enough to destroy them. The spring semester was when everything truly came together. I'd declared my major in English with a creative writing emphasis. My poetry professor had submitted 3 of my poems to a national college literary magazine, and they'd all been accepted. Marcus and I had said, "I love you," for the first time during a weekend trip to San Diego, and I'd meant it with a clarity that terrified and thrilled me. My father had dinner with me once a month now, and we were slowly building a real relationship, the kind we'd never had when I was younger. He told me about his own childhood, about his parents' divorce and his mother's strength, and I understood better where my own resilience had come from. My grandmother would have been proud of me, I thought. She would have loved seeing me thrive. Emma completed her program in Arizona and moved into her supervised apartment in Los Angeles. My father asked if I wanted to see her, and I said, not yet, maybe someday. That someday came sooner than I expected. I was at the bookstore in March helping a customer find a specific translation of The Odyssey when I looked up and saw Emma standing at the end of the aisle. She looked different, thinner, paler, her hair shorter and unstyled. She was wearing jeans and a plain sweater instead of the designer clothes she'd always favored. She looked for the first time in her life like a normal person instead of a carefully curated image. "I'm not here to bother you," she said quickly before I could speak. "I'm in a day program at UCLA Med Center, therapy and stuff. I saw you through the window and I needed to see that you were real, that you were okay." I set down the book I was holding. "I'm okay." "Good. That's good." She twisted her hands together, a nervous gesture I'd never seen from her before. In my past life, Emma had been confident to the point of cruelty. This Emma was unsure, vulnerable, and somehow more human. "How are you?" I asked, and I was surprised to find that I actually wanted to know. "Better, not good, but better. I'm learning a lot about myself, and most of it is pretty ugly." She laughed, but it was sad. "The therapist says I have a lot of work to do. Years, probably. And that I need to accept that you might never want me in your life again. And that's your right." "It is," I agreed. "I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see you now. I see what I did to you, and I'm sorry." She turned to leave, and I watched her go. Some part of me felt sad for the sister I'd loved despite everything, for the child she'd been before our mother had twisted her into a weapon. But I didn't call her back. I wasn't ready for that yet, and maybe I never would be. That evening, I wrote a poem about two sisters, one who'd spent her life being devoured and one who'd spent her life devouring. And about the moment when the first sister finally learned that the only way to survive was to refuse to be food. My professor loved it. "This is your strongest work yet," she said. "Have you considered submitting to the Henley Prize?" The Henley Prize was a prestigious national poetry award with a $10,000 prize. In my past life, I'd never even heard of it. Now, with her encouragement, I submitted a portfolio of my best poems. In April, I won. The award ceremony was in New York, and Marcus came with me. We spent the weekend exploring the city, eating at tiny restaurants in the West Village, visiting museums, walking through Central Park. On our last night, we went to the top of the Empire State Building, and he told me he'd gotten a job offer at a development firm in Los Angeles after graduation. "I'm staying," he said. "I mean, if you want me to, I know we're young and we've only been together for 6 months, but Lily, I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you're building this incredible life for yourself. I want to be part of that life if you'll have me." I kissed him instead of answering with words, and when we pulled apart, we were both crying and laughing. "Is that a yes?" he asked. "That's a yes," I said. The night before we flew back to Los Angeles, my phone rang. It was a California number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer. "Lily, it's Detective Chen. I wanted to give you an update. On your case." "My case?" "The situation with your sister and Miss Martin. I probably shouldn't be calling you. It's not exactly protocol. But I wanted you to know that the civil lawsuit between the families has been settled. Your mother has agreed to cover Miss Martin's medical expenses and therapy costs. Your sister has completed her treatment program successfully, and Miss Martin has dropped all charges and restraining order requests." "That's good," I said. "There's more. Miss Martin has also been charged in an unrelated case, wire fraud and identity theft. It turns out she's been running a scam for years, creating emotional dependence in vulnerable young women and then draining their bank accounts. Your sister wasn't her first victim. You both were." I sat down on the hotel bed processing this information. How many others? "At least 7 that we know of. The investigation is ongoing. It's possible there are more." Detective Chen paused. "Your sister's testimony was instrumental in building the case against Miss Martin. She's been cooperating fully with investigators." "Is Zoe going to jail?" "That depends on a lot of factors, but given the evidence, it's likely. The DA is pushing for a strong sentence." After I hung up, I told Marcus everything about my past life, about dying, about being reborn. He listened without interrupting, his face serious, and when I finished, he pulled me into his arms. "I believe you," he said simply. "I don't understand it, but I believe you, and I'm glad you got a second chance. The world is better with you in it." That night, I dreamed about my death in my previous life. But this time, when I woke up on that bathroom floor, staring at the ceiling, I didn't die. Instead, I stood up, walked out of the apartment, and never looked back. Graduation day was perfect. I walked across the stage in my cap and gown, summa cum laude, with a degree in English and creative writing and a job offer from a prestigious literary magazine in Los Angeles. My father was in the audience, cheering louder than anyone. Marcus was there with his family, all of them treating me like I was already one of them. Sarah was there with her marine biology friends, making a section of the crowd chant my name. Emma wasn't there, but she'd sent a card. "Congratulations on your graduation and on your life. I'm proud of you, even though I have no right to be. Love, Emma." I'd hung the card on my bulletin board next to the acceptance letter from the literary magazine and a photo of Marcus and me at the beach. That night, at the graduation party Marcus's family threw for us, I got a call from a number with a New York area code. "Miss Chen, this is Laura Winters from Winters Literary Agency. I read your poetry collection when you won the Henley Prize, and I was wondering if you'd ever considered writing a memoir. I think your story about escaping a toxic family and building a new life could really resonate with readers." I looked across the party at Marcus, who was laughing with his brother, at Sarah, who was explaining something about sea turtles to Marcus's confused grandmother, at my father, who was sitting quietly in a corner but smiling, really smiling for the first time in my memory. "I'd like that," I told Laura Winters. "I have a lot to say." 5 years later, my memoir, The Second Life, hit the New York Times bestseller list. It was the story of my escape from my family, though I'd changed names and details to protect privacy. I'd written about emotional abuse, about toxic friendships, about learning to set boundaries and save yourself when no one else will. I'd written about the importance of walking away from people who only know how to take. The book resonated. I got letters from thousands of readers telling me their own stories of escape, of recovery, of learning to thrive after abuse. I did speaking tours at colleges and conferences. I started a foundation to help young people from abusive families access therapy and resources. Marcus and I got married in a small ceremony on the beach, with Sarah as my maid of honor and my father walking me down the aisle. Emma sent a gift, a first edition of my grandmother's favorite book, and a card saying she was happy for me. I sent a thank you note but didn't invite her to the wedding. Maybe someday our relationship would heal enough for that, but not yet. My mother tried to contact me once after the book came out, claiming I'd defamed her and demanding I pay her royalties for using her story. My lawyer sent her a cease and desist letter, and I never heard from her again. Zoe was released from prison after serving 3 years of a 7-year sentence. She tried to contact me through social media, claiming she'd changed and wanted to apologize. I blocked her without reading the full message. Some people deserved second chances. Zoe wasn't one of them. I published a poetry collection, then a novel, then another memoir, this one about building a life after trauma. Each book did better than the last. And with each success, I felt the ghost of my past life fade a little more. On the 10th anniversary of the day I'd left home, the day I'd walked out of my mother's house and chosen myself for the first time, Marcus and I were sitting on our balcony watching the sunset over Los Angeles. We had a beautiful apartment in Silver Lake with room for the baby that was due in 3 months. My father was coming over for dinner later, bringing his new girlfriend, a kind woman who'd survived her own bad marriage and understood the value of second chances. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked, his hand on my growing belly. "Leaving them all behind?" I thought about the question seriously, as I always did when he asked. "Sometimes I wish they'd been different people," I said. "I wish I'd had a mother who loved me and a sister who was actually my sister. I wish Zoe had been a real friend. But do I regret leaving? Never. Not for a second." "Good," he said, kissing my temple. "Because I'm really glad you chose yourself. Otherwise, I might never have met you." That night, after my father and his girlfriend left, after we'd cleaned up and gotten ready for bed, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and looked at my reflection. I was 33 now, 3 years older than I'd been when I died in my previous life. I had laugh lines around my eyes and a softness to my body that came from being happy and well fed and loved. I looked nothing like the broken, exhausted girl who'd swallowed those pills. I looked like someone who'd saved herself. In my first life, I'd died young and full of regret, murdered by the people I'd loved most. In my second life, I'd learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to participate in your own destruction. I'd walked away from my sister and my former best friend, and without me there to mediate their dysfunction, they'd imploded in 2 weeks. Without me there to exploit, they'd had nothing left but their own toxicity, and it had consumed them. And I'd built something beautiful in the space where they used to be. I turned off the bathroom light and went to bed next to my husband, my hand on my belly where my daughter was growing, and I felt nothing but peace. I'd won. Not by destroying them, but by refusing to let them destroy me. And that was the sweetest victory of all.